Gabor Lukacs is an advocate for the rights of air passengers, and he joins me from Halifax. So, Gabor, what did you make of what you saw?
This video is profoundly disturbing. No human being should be treated this way. The airline and the security officers treated this passenger as a criminal, even though quite clearly he did nothing wrong in terms of danger or risk to the traveling public, and he was peaceful.
And so what do you make of the use of force to remove him from that plane?
Clearly, an excessive amount of force has been used. This is not an appropriate way to treat passengers.
The passenger was asked to leave the plane to give room for a standby staff member. Do airlines have the right to bump passengers off the plane after boarding? There were three others that were asked to leave, and they left voluntarily. I believe there was a cash incentive, but he said he was a doctor and that he had patients to see and that he was not getting off the plane. But do airlines have the right to remove people from the plane?
Airlines have the right and do involuntarily deny passengers boarding or bump them from flights, even though passengers want to travel. They do have to pay cash compensation. In the US, unlike in Canada, there are standardized amounts set out in regulations of how much compensation the airline has to pay. The issue here is not simply the removal of the passenger, but how it was done, in what callous manner it was done.
So then help me understand that. Was it their right to do that? Have we just not read the fine print when we travel on airplanes that it is their right to physically remove you from a plane, even though you've paid for your ticket, to accommodate an employee that needs to get to the destination?
And in terms of boarding priorities, who has to yield to whom, that is set out to some degree in some airlines' terms and conditions. In the case of United, my recollection is that those terms and conditions are more vague about how they decide who gets to stay and who doesn't. But when a flight is oversold, when there are more passengers booked on the flight than actually seats available, the airline can deny a passenger transportation on that specific flight, but they still have to pay them cash compensation, and they have to provide accommodation and meals and rebook the passenger on.
But usually that happens before the passenger gets on the plane, right? I mean, this is an example of a passenger already sitting down in the seat, having paid for that seat. So isn't that a little bit more unusual to actually, give that person a seat and then have the police come on or the authorities come on and physically drag him out of his seat?
So there are two issues here. It's indeed unusual to deny someone transportation or boarding after they have taken their seats, but not unheard of. Here in Halifax, there was a case where a passenger was connecting in Vancouver, and he got on the plane and found somebody else in his seat, and actually he was told to get off the plane. He was then compensated, although we had to go to court about it. The real issue, however, is that the police had to get involved and was involved in what is essentially a civil dispute. That's a bigger issue, that airlines are using the fear about terrorism and safety of passengers as a tool, as an excuse for involving the authorities in private civil disputes between the passenger and the airline. If you have a dispute with the airline and you want the police officer to interfere, they will tell you, sorry, this is your civil dispute, take the airline to court. On the other hand, when the airline has a dispute with you, it seems that police is way too eager to step in, even when you are peaceful, even when you don't pose any threat to the public. And that is an overarching problem that should be addressed.
So what rights did this passenger have if he did not want to leave that plane?
The passenger should have left when he was asked to leave. So the airline wasn't allowed to ask him to leave, although had some obligations after he left. The passenger should have probably asked who is the person directing him to leave. The person should identify themselves with name, rank, and the reason that they are being asked to leave. And after that, perhaps after documenting that with his cell phone, he should have walked off the plane. That would have been the prudent thing to do, because the airline can issue directions and you have to follow those directions. What happens after that you may have a very strong case for a significant amount of compensation payable, but it is the airline's aircraft, so you do have to follow what they tell you as long as it doesn't put you physically at risk.
Now, the Associated Press, by the way, is reporting that one of the officers involved in dragging the man off the United Airlines plane did not follow standard operating procedures and has been placed on leave.
I'm most pleased to hear that because I have seen photographs where the same passenger was having blood on his face. That is not supposed to happen when you're removing a peaceful passenger who may be having a civil dispute with the airline, but this is not criminal activity. What I'm finding shocking here, and an issue that in Canada we should be looking at and we should be concerned about, is the misuse of criminal law and police, whose mandate is to deal with criminals, to civil disputes between airlines and passengers. Police should show far more restraint and should decline to interfere in civil matters when the airline asks them to interfere, the same way that they would decline when a passenger asks to interfere.
So wait, I want to understand what you're saying here. So you're saying that the police should not have boarded that plane in the first place and removed this passenger physically? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the police perhaps should have boarded to inspect the situation to confirm that there is no disturbance of the peace. The job of the police is to keep the peace. The passenger was peaceful, he was not threatening anybody. They had a civil dispute with the airline. The police should have shown far more restraint and perhaps let first the passenger and the airline negotiate and discuss the situation, and then simply ask the passenger that because it's the airline's aircraft, the airline asks him to leave the aircraft, and use far more good judgment before they would use any force, and even then use the minimal possible force with the passenger. This is clearly not what happened. We have seen that when police wants to be gentle, say in politically sensitive demonstrations, they actually lift people from the floor. 3 or 4 police officers could have gently lifted the passenger who was not resisting. You have to remember, this was a passenger who was just passively refusing to get out of his seat. So they could have come on, gently lift him out of his seat, take him off the aircraft, or first go up to him and tell him, "Sir, you have been told to leave. If you refuse to leave, we will have to lift you out from your seat because it's a private property." Even then, it is debatable to what extent police should be involved in such situations, which are in civil nature. It is not like a private home where somebody goes into your home and refuses to leave, in which case police would intervene, for sure. The question is, was there risk to the public? No. In such situations, police should use a lot of restraint because this is an essential civil dispute. The same
or maybe the United Airlines should have just said, "All right, you know, we're not going to have this employee take that seat."
That's a separate issue, which is also a concern. Why United Airlines requires a paying passenger to vacate his seat for the sake of an employee. United perhaps could have then chosen someone else to bump, even involuntarily, who is not a doctor, who perhaps is willing to more cooperate. But the idea that United can actually force someone physically who is not being violent off the plane is something that troubles me a great deal. Because I know that if I had a dispute with United, if I had, say, a valid boarding pass, but they would tell me, "No, you're not getting on the plane," the police would not help me to get on the plane. So the police should remain neutral, and as long as there is no violence involved, no disturbance of the peace involved, this remains a civil dispute, and the airline and the passenger should sort it out in courts, privately. That's not why we are paying police officers from taxpayers' money. We're paying them to keep the peace.
I'm going to quote what the CEO had to say and get you to react. This is part of the statement. "This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United. I apologize for having to reaccommodate these passengers." Reaccommodate?
I think that in the circumstances it would be appropriate for a CEO to resign. Those comments were so grossly inappropriate that they show complete lack of sensitivity and reflects on United's behavior. United has been known for being a very bad airline in terms of highest number of complaints available publicly, according to U.S. statistics, against United, especially after they merged with Continental. And those comments coming from a CEO just demonstrates complete lack of aptitude to be a leader. You cannot call what happened to this passenger reaccommodation. I wish, or in fact don't wish, the CEO to be reaccommodated this way from his job as a CEO to perhaps something more suitable for him, like a street sweeper, which is what his skills seem to be more suitable for.
Gabor, interesting to get your insight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Gabor Lukacs in Halifax. He is an advocate.